preacher, John Hendee, and we're about personal evangelism. And I'll let Chris introduce him to you. He's known John for a long time, but I'm just saying, I encourage you to stay today, please, because I asked you to. It won't be a waste of your time, and you won't regret it, and it'll be a good time together. And we won't be too awful long. He has a plane to catch in a little bit to go back to San Diego. So, but I'm going to let Chris introduce him to you.
Oh.
Age has nothing to do with it. Yeah. I hope you're giving out your New Testament, and there's people all over town that need a New Testament. And I hope that you're looking for open doors and opportunities to do that. We have some extra ones. They're not extra. We have more out here. And in addition to that, we also have some in Spanish. So if you have Hispanic friends who would benefit from having a Spanish New Testament, we want to open that door as well.
All right. And I apologize. I showed up to worship and looked down at my feet and went, oops, I'm not wearing shoes. I first became familiar with John Hendee when I was an undergrad student, and we became familiar with his evangelistic tools and methods known as the Peace Treaty with God. And in the Restoration Church movement and the Christian church movement, John Hendee is one of those names that people just sort of, oh, John Hendee, this, John. You just hear his name all the time. John and I became friends because while he served as chairman of World Evangelism at Hope International University, we got to co-teach in a class together, and it was a lot of fun. John is an evangelist, but he's more than an evangelist. He's not just out preaching the gospel and baptizing people. That would be enough. But he's training people worldwide to share the gospel and baptize people. Heaven's going to be completely different because of this man's ministry, as well hell will be. John has worked in Mexico, Peru, India, Chile, Ecuador, Nigeria, Cameroon, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Egypt, and in 2 weeks he's heading to India. And he's full of energy. If you've ever met with him, he's just always on the go. He's helping us right now with his materials, and he's here to work with the leadership of the church. And his wife made me mention he's been married for 56 years. So please welcome John Hendee.
Thank you, brother. To the same woman. I'm so glad to be here. I love this guy, and he was my favorite professor at Hope when I was teaching up there. And I wasn't full-time on campus, but we just built a really good friendship. And it's hard to see you out there, you know. I can see why they picked this church. Church shopping is hard. And they looked and looked while they moved here, and I like what they found, and they like it. I'm here this morning to encourage you and to challenge you to do something. Next. I don't know where they got that picture. We've got a problem. It's a huge problem. And we have a solution for this problem. Next. Our problem is that from my experience over the last 50-some years since I became a Christian, I was not raised in the church. My dad was a skeptic till he was 79. But as an older teenager, I found the Lord in spite of his decision at that point in life. And my experience is that less than 1% of all churches I see or read about or anything else have any kind of ongoing personal evangelism today. And we've developed a model that can help with that. And so a sub-problem with that, as I've observed over the years as I've gotten around, is that most Christians do not know how to start a conversation with those who aren't believers to lead to the point to find out if they'd like to sit down and hear the gospel. And then if they find somebody that does seem interested, they're really not sure what to do. I'm reminded of the Ethiopian eunuch in the book of Acts, where God, the Holy Spirit, led him to this Philip, to this Ethiopian in his chariot, and he's reading the gospel of Isaiah, and Philip came alongside of him, and he asked him if he understood what he was reading. And I can sort of picture that today, you know, the average Christian sitting next to somebody someplace, and they look over and they see they got one of those New Testaments, and they're reading it, and the person looks at the other person and said, I don't know, do you understand any of this? I don't understand what this is all about. Well, you know, I know something about that, but if you'd like to come to our church, my preacher can explain it to you, because we don't know what to do. And the problem is we haven't been equipped or trained how to do it, and how to share the gospel without being weird or aggressive or obnoxious. And as I've looked at this problem over the years, I'm seeing this more clearly right now. I don't know of any Bible college or any seminary, period, who makes equipping their leaders in
and
how
as I've
to
looked at this problem over the
effectively
years,
share
I'm
the
seeing this
gospel
more clearly
one-on-one
right
with other
now.
people.
Makes
Yeah, most of them can
equipping
get up
their
on a Sunday
leaders
morning and stand before a crowd and preach, but 99% of the people that need to hear the message aren't in here. They're out there. And we don't know how to go out there in a tactful, smart way and connect with people. Next. So there's some good news. And the good news is what I want to encourage you in today. There's a way every one of you, can learn how to connect with people, relatives, friends, neighbors, work associates, sometimes strangers, and begin a conversation with them without coming across as weird or obnoxious, and find out if they would be interested in sitting down with you and hearing a good presentation of the good news. As Chris said, in 2 weeks from this next Friday, I'll be making another trip to India. I'll be taking 2 guys with me. We're going to 4 cities. I've connected with a man. He's a lawyer. He's the head of the Billy Graham Association for all of India. And we are going to do the training in 4 cities, hope to train 600, 700, 800 people. And he wants me to come back and go to northern India and do the same kind of routine in 4 areas up there, which is a tougher area. It's predominantly Hindu, and they don't act real well toward Christians. But the good news is we've developed a model to help people around the world get over this problem of not knowing what to do with unbelievers. Next. Here are some pictures of some of the groups we've trained over the last few years in Kenya, Uganda, Philippines. I just finished up in this last year 7 Zoom trainings over 7 months, 1 month for a different place in 7 cities in Pakistan. And the people where they get this, they're just excited about it. They're telling us, we've never gotten anything like this before, and they're taking it and they're using it. Next. And so these pictures on the left are some of the pictures that a man by the name of Joffrey, he learned how to use our approach several years ago. He started using it himself, and he is training others. I've been in his house. I had a dirt floor and an old beat-up couch. And yet, last year, his goal was to train 1,000 Christians in this. His goal this year is 2,000. And he'll come close to accomplishing that. These pictures on the right are some of the groups we trained in Pakistan. Next. Here's some of the people who are using it. Joffrey's upper left-hand corner, Pentecostal preacher. He's taken this stuff and he's just gone all over the place. He's training a police department. It's a long story how that even happened, coming up soon. He trained a group of 80 people from a Catholic church in this. And he said they loved it. And they said, you got to come back and do this more. He said they were shocked when they heard what was in these 4 lessons. They'd never really heard the real gospel before. The man in the upper right-hand corner, Mike and Danny, they worked with me. They came down to Peru, and we were working there, in Peru. And he was a truck driver. When he was a young man, he was a hockey player, professional in Canada. A car wrecked his ankle. That was into that. So when I met him at the time, he was a truck driver, and they wanted to go to the mission field. So they came to help us improve, basically to help with visiting teams, set up the arrangements and everything first. Well, we found out Mike and Danny learned our model, and they're evangelists. 2 years ago, they moved to Ethiopia. They're training thousands of people. In fact, they've connected with one group of churches with 10,000 churches in their country, and they want all of their leaders trained in this. They've got 2,000 missionaries. They want all their missionaries trained in our model. Joko Quillard in the middle, he's been using our approach for years. He's been to Zimbabwe in the last few years. He's trained men down there who are now taking it and training it in their country and other areas. Jim Phillips, lower left-hand corner, he was an intern of mine years ago. He learned this model. He went on and used it to help build a church of 2,000 in Denver. And in the last 6 or 7 years, maybe 8, he's been going to Africa and training people there. He's actually the first one that got me to go to Africa. Said, John, you got to come over here and see how the people are using this. The man in the bottom is Sebastian Joseph. He's the lawyer, head of the Billy Graham Association in India, where we're going to train people. I met him there on my last trip. On the right-hand side is Peter Salibi. He's the leader of the ministries where we just trained in Pakistan. Lower right-hand corner is Safa. He's the leader of the work in Egypt. I've been there 3 times. We hope to go back again in the middle of this next year. And he just finished. He's Egyptian. He just finished a 56 volume set of Bible commentaries in Arabic. What a man. And he can hardly walk now because of back problems, but he just doesn't give up. And he's got connected. They have like 35,000 kids in VBS in Egypt every year. They have a women's ministry across the country. All these people in these other countries are a minority, the Christians. Maybe 2% at best. Next. So we have to ask ourselves this question here in the U.S. It says in 1 Corinthians 4:2 that it's required that those who've been given a trust must prove faithful. What is the trust God has given us? It's the gospel. It's that thing Chris was talking about, the value of how much is your house worth? It depends what somebody's willing to pay for it. So how much are you worth? God was willing to pay a lot for that. I just looked up again a little while ago. There are 60 million people who die around the world every year. 60 million. There are people who are dying without hope. And you don't need me to tell you that the state of the church here in the United States is not healthy right now. Churches have been closing. We're losing. It seems at times we're going backwards. I hate it when I hear somebody say, well, God's just cleaning out the flock. That's terrible. I'm sorry. That God's purging all the non-committed out of, that we need to be growing. And it's not growing the church. God grows the church, but we need to be doing what he's commanded us to do. And he expects us to be faithful. If I've received this, the good news, he expects me to do something with it, not just sit on it. 2 Corinthians 5:18-20, that makes it clear that we are Christ's ambassadors. God has given us this to us to go reconcile others with this good news to him. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? Nobody. And we need to learn how to go out there and do it with the people around us in our lives, our family, our friends, our relatives, our neighbors, our work associates, because again, at the beginning, 99% of them out there are not going to come to church. Some will. And God bless them. And usually they're people who've got a little bit of openness. They're seeking for something. They know they're missing something in life. But the other people, the command of the church to us was to go. Not wait for them to come to us. But to do that, we know the Great Commission, Matthew 28, some call it the Great Commission, others the Great Command. And I'm wondering if at times if we think it's the minor or optional commission, take it or leave it. That's what we got preachers for, isn't it? Such a terrible misunderstanding. And we have to remember this world is not our home. one of these days, for some of us it's coming closer age-wise than for others, but we'll be one of those 60 million. It could happen any day. I don't care if you're 14 or 94. But we need to be busy about what God's called us to do. I don't care what your vocation or your job is. In the midst of that, and having a family and a house and bills and taxes and all that else, in the midst of that, God has us where we are at any given time in our life to be his ambassadors. And I've concluded this over the years again. If you're not trained how to effectively share the gospel with other people, you're probably not going to be doing it. Because you're not sure how to do it, you're afraid to do it, you're afraid you're going to come across wrong, you're going to do it the wrong way. This church has started a training program to help you learn how. Now, they got a group they're already training, and when they get that group trained, they're going to look for some others they want to train, and they'll just keep training group by group by group. And I'm here this morning to encourage you, when the opportunity comes up again, get in there. Man, woman, young or old, this is for all of you. Anybody can do this, I guarantee you, but you just have to be willing to learn how to do it. In Acts 20:24, Paul said, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to complete the race and finish the task the Lord has given me, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace. That ought to be our mindset. This life is, it's not to depreciate or minimize what we have in our life, but in the big picture, everyone's going to die. And as I consider the fact, my life is really worth nothing, but it's invaluable to God. He died for it, to save us. And he's given us a mission doing that. If I just take this and hide it in my back pocket, I've got it. Oh, you don't? Oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry. He wants us out of love. It says in 2 Corinthians 5:18 or 17, I think it is, the love of Christ compels us. If I really understand how great God's love for me is, it's got to move me to want to share it with others. That's what moves me. And if I don't love him, I'm not going to share it with anybody. I've seen a terrible shift take place over the years here in the United States, and it's affected the other world because many travel from the States and do seminars all around the world, and it's a subtle change, and it's a disastrous change. We've gone from the command to make disciples to just about any church you look at their bulletin, their newsletters, their bylaws, whatever, and you ask them, are you making disciples? Oh yeah, we're doing disciple making. Do you hear the difference? Disciple making is not the same thing as making disciples. And so almost all churches have this umbrella. We have disciple making ministries. But if you look closely at what they're doing in those, almost everything they do under the title of disciple making is what they're doing with those who are already Christians. And I guess the thinking is if we can get you deep enough, mature enough, strong enough, then you're going to go make disciples. But I think it's a way to get us off the hook. Sounds good. You know, the phrase disciple making does not exist in the Bible. Not there. Make disciples is. And we've been called to make disciples. Of course, disciple making, what we call that, is what we're doing with each other. And much of that needs to be done. We need to grow and understand and mature. But I was just thinking this morning, I saw on Facebook a preacher I know. He just had an accident. I don't know what happened, but one of his legs got injured. And I don't know why people do this, but he had to put the picture of the before and after of his leg on Facebook. Sometimes like, I don't need to see your operation. That's okay. But he had the before and after, his before leg, and then the after had been in a cast for weeks. And he said, I didn't know your muscles could atrophy so fast. And I had that happen to me too when we were in Chile. I broke my Achilles tendon. And so I was in a cast for 6 weeks. I forget the order. I think it was a full leg cast for like 2 weeks and then 4 weeks of lower cast. And they took that thing off, and I looked at it, I said, where'd my leg go? And I was like, oh, bone. And I thought about that. You know, if you don't use a muscle, it will atrophy from lack of use. And I think we have an evangelism atrophy. So we've shifted from make disciples to disciple making, and that evangelism emphasis, theme, just atrophies, gets small. If you don't use it, and we can learn to limp and get along without that leg and that muscle if I want, or I can exercise it and rebuild it. And so if we've lost that in our church and our ministries, we need to recognize it, accept it, and rebuild it. And the good news is we have a way to rebuild that, to help anyone, man or woman, young or old, learn how at the right time with the right people to share the gospel. Next. Next. So what we have is what we call relational evangelism. There's two parts of this. The first part, and this is developed over 30, 40 years. We keep refining it. It gets a little bit tweaked, a little bit better. So the first part is in our training is we show Christians, how do I start a conversation with somebody I've known all my life or half my life or been working next to them a long time, or somebody I just met, and I'm going to be sitting next to them at a meal or some occasion, and we got some time to be able to chit-chat. I've learned how to use this conversation. We call it form. We've adapted a little bit recently to Ford, but form still works. That's what you're being taught here. And if you can remember form, you have an outline how to start a conversation with anybody, anywhere, at any time. That will lead to finding out if they'd be interested in sitting down with you and hearing you share the gospel presentation. I call this the golden key that can unlock some doors that otherwise may never open. So this way this works is I just start asking you questions about your family. If I haven't known you before and we're together for a little bit, do you live around here? How long have you been here? Where'd you come from? Do you like it here? What brought you here? Do you have other relatives in the area? And half the time I hear people's life story and I never even ask them half the stuff. And then I transition at some point to O, which stands for occupation. What line of work are you in? How long have you been doing it? You're teaching. Well, that's exciting. How long have you been teaching? What do you teach? What do you like best about teaching? Boy, teaching today's got to be tough. So I'm showing interest in them. I'm not talking about me. I don't talk in this conversation. I don't bring up, listen to this, I don't bring up myself in this conversation. I don't talk about God, Jesus, Bible, church, or my testimony. And it has resulted in hundreds of occasions when I've been able to later sit down with people and share our 4 lessons with them and see an interesting people come to Jesus that would never have come if I invited them to church first. Some people will come if we invite them to church, and that's good, but most of them won't. So after talking about O, then I'll just transition and say, I'm just curious, do you have any religious background? I've been doing this for 40-some years. I've never had anybody in this order act offended, but because I asked them that question, even atheists. And we have a special little approach as to what to do with atheists when they ask, oh, I'm an atheist. I used to be scared of them. I'm not anymore. I've got a fun little technique I use with them that's resulted in my being able to sit down with some of them and see some of them come to Christ. And so I just ask them. I don't attack, question, or I may say, well, so you're such and such religion? How long have you been there? How'd you get into it? What do you have to do as a whatever? And I just listen. And then I come to M, and this is what I call the golden key. I ask them one question. One question. I do this with everybody. I don't care who they are. I'm not deterred by their personality, their good looks or not, their power, their status, their wealth, their poverty, their lifestyle, sexually or morally. I don't care. That's irrelevant at this point. I just ask everybody the same question. And I've never had, again, anybody, by this point, it's amazing. I can see them. They just stop and think. And we prepare how to do this in our training. You can get it here. And the question is this: do you feel like you've come to the place in your life where you could say for sure that if you died today, you'd go to heaven? It's uncanny how that just stops people and they start thinking about that. And that can lead to us asking them. Most people aren't, even religious people. Now, if you're a Christian, you ought to be able to say yes to that right off the bat. And if you can't, then you need to go through our 4 lessons, or lessons are being taught here, to understand your position in Christ better. And it's not because you're so much better than everybody else, but it's because of what Christ has done for us. So everybody else, I can say, if they say, well, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or not me, I say, if you could be sure, would you want to be? 99 out of 100 people are going to say, well, of course, yeah, sure. And then I say, if you would be interested, I'd be glad to get together with you and take you through some studies we have that'll show you what the Bible says, what you need to do to be sure that when you die, you'll go to heaven. If they're interested, we do it. If they're not, I'm done. If they're not interested, I don't force it on them. I don't all of a sudden try to share my testimony or start preaching to them and say, well, but I respect them and their decision. Next. I don't know who Vance Havner is, but I saw this online recently. It's not our business to make the message acceptable, but to make it available. We are not to see that they like it, but that they get it. But we need to present it in a gentle and crafty way that we're not offensive in the way we approach people. Not everybody's going to be interested. Not everybody's going to sit down and listen to the lessons. Not everybody who goes through the lessons is going to accept Christ. But we at least need to make the offer. And there's a way we can do that without shutting off our relationship with them. Again, I've been doing this for 40-some years, and I don't need one hand to name the number of people who shut off our relationship because I did this conversation with them. In fact, some of these people, I'll show you a little bit later, have become dear friends of mine, and there's some interesting people. Next. Next. I want to tell you a story about a doctor. He came home from work one day, and his wife told him, hey, I just found out our neighbor has got stage 4 cancer. And the doctor was shocked. He said, well, how did that happen? We didn't know about this. And he said, and that was one of his specialties, was dealing with cancer. And he said, asked his wife, would you fix a pot of your special chicken noodle soup? I can take that over. Let me get cleaned up and you get the soup ready. And so she got the soup ready and he got cleaned up. And then he went to his little medical refrigerator in the house and he took out a vial of the medicine that from her description, he was sure this medicine would cure the man's cancer. Stuck it in his shirt pocket. Went over with a pot of soup. Knocked on the door, the wife greeted him. She took the soup to the kitchen, took him into the bedroom where the man was in bed. And he sat down next to him and he said, I just found out an hour ago what's been happening to you. I said, I can't believe this. And so how'd this develop and what treatment you been on? So he heard his whole story about that. He was empathetic, he was listening to his story. And he said, I can't believe how this has happened. Next door to me. And then he said, I'm sure there's some things you could use some help with. I mean, you're bedridden right now. Is there anything that we could do or I could do to help you? And the guy said, well, you've probably noticed my lawn has shot out there because I haven't been able to get out there and work in my yard. And Doc said, don't worry about it. Tomorrow, day off, my sons and I will be over here. We're going to clean it up. Like the pros came in here. And then the man said, well, my wife said the front doors, the hinges are bad and it's about to fall off. It'll be fixed tomorrow. Don't worry about it. If there's anything else you need help with, you let me know. Transportation, getting groceries, kids to school, whatever it is, you let us know. We're here to help you. And again, he expressed his sympathy and said, well, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow because we're coming over to work on those things. He said, would it be okay with you before I leave if I prayed for you? Well, the man wasn't a real man of prayer, but, well, you're not going to turn prayer down probably at that point, most people. So he said, yeah, so he prayed for him, got up and he left and he went home. So what's wrong with that story? The vial. Did the man need somebody to visit him, show interest in his situation? Of course. Did he need somebody to show compassion? Of course. Did he need somebody to listen to him? Of course. Did he need some nourishment, some food? Yes. Did he need someone to help him with the things he couldn't do anymore at the time? Yes. Did he need somebody to pray for him? Of course. But he needed the vial. Now, I suppose in the coming weeks, the man, when other relatives would visit him, and they'd come in, he'd say, hey, let me tell you about my neighbor. He's the most amazing man. He is so loving. I mean, I can't believe it. But then a couple weeks later, the wives were talking, and the doctor's wife says to the other man's wife, he said, I'm just shocked your husband hasn't gotten better with the medicine my husband brought over him when he first visited. The wife said, what medicine? I don't know anything about any medicine. I said, my husband, when he first came over there, he had a vial of the medicine that should have cured your husband's cancer. And so later, the wife of the sick man was talking to him. She said, I was talking to the doctor's wife, and she said, you should have gotten better with the vial of medicine he had for you. I don't know anything about that medicine. He never offered it to me. Now, do you think that man would still be telling his relatives and other friends who visited him about how loving his doctor neighbor is? So in the church, we can do a lot of good things for people out there, but in the end, if we don't give them the vial, offer them the vial, the life-saving vial, we ought not to tell anybody we love them. They need Jesus. Next. When I was a young boy into manhood, young adult, I described myself as quiet, shy, timid, reserved, insecure, scared, fearful. I got literally the dry heaves when I went into about any new situation. Going back to school after Christmas break, going to a dentist I hadn't been to before, I hated it. And then I became a Christian, and then I realized I'm supposed to be sharing Jesus with other people, but I think that's going to be a little complicated when every time I start talking, I go, Well, God helped me overcome that with years, but the way I overcame it was learning this program that's being taught here. And so I have some friends who weren't raised that. I mean, didn't grow up that way. They're naturally outgoing and bubbling in the life of the party. And so, but most of us are not what I call peacocks. So the difference between, I'm a turtle. I'm a turtle. So, when you go to the zoo, if you got zoos down here, and the peacocks come out, and everybody rushing over there. Where's my camera? I got to get a picture of that. Get that tail open there. And, turtle comes by. Oh, cool. And you just sort of walk on. So I'm the kind of guy, if I walk into an event that some buddies are having, and they're over there playing cards or something, and I walk in, they'll walk in the door, and they'll look around. Oh, hi, John. See, whose hand is it now? And but my peacock friends, they walk in the door. Oh, Tim. Hey, forget it. We'll finish this later. Tim's here. And, I'm the turtle. And so the way I saw myself for years as a new Christian, for years, I was a scared turtle. I just didn't know how to go about doing this. I knew I should do it, but I didn't know how to go about it. And then when I learned what's being trained here, I'm still a turtle, but I'm a confident turtle. Next. So to do what we call relational evangelism, how to start this conversation, and then if they're interested, how to sit down and go through these 4 studies with them, you don't have to be a long-time Christian. You don't have to be a Bible scholar, a church leader, a man. Women can be just as effective, if not more so, than many men, talented. You don't have to be gifted, popular, famous, rich, outgoing, perfect, and intellectual, good-looking athlete. You don't have to let the lack of those things stop you. I'm none of those. Long-time Christian. I've never been accused of being an intellectual. Now, at this point in my life, I can get up front and stand in front of people, but my basic nature is I'm still a turtle. And yet, in spite of that, Paul said that. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But if you're trained, you can learn how to reach out and show love to people by making an offer to sit down with them and share the good news anyway. Next. Next. Now, I've got a list here, and I've got some of the pictures. I'm not going to have time to talk about all these. Here's a partial list of, since I learned this model, some of the kinds of people I've been able to do this form with. I've just, in most all of these cases here, they're people I did not know prior. They had not visited the church first, and I met them out there someplace. And I did this form with them, this simple conversation. My dad was outgoing, boisterous. He could talk to anybody, and growing up, I hated it. I was always embarrassed. Come on, Dad, shut up. You know, you're going to be here another hour talking to this guy if you keep talking. But I learned if I love people, I have to be willing to engage with them. And as a result, I've done and taken through these 4 studies we have, or 3, I think you're using a model of 3 here. I've done this with atheists. And I remember one atheist I did this with, worked through the lessons. I gave him some other materials to read. And when I asked him in the 3rd lesson if he believed in Jesus, he sat there and he said, yes. And he just shook his head. And he looked at me and said, did that just come out of my mouth? He said, that sounds so weird. I mean, he had rejected it, fought it all his life. I've done these studies with a muscle-bound weightlifter who was sleeping probably, I was around him a number of times. I think he had slept with every waitress in every restaurant in town. At the time I met him, his girlfriend was a Playboy bunny. We took both of them through the studies. They accepted Christ. I've done this with transvestites. They accepted Christ. I've done this with a good friend of mine now who became a missionary, worked with us in Peru. At the time, he was a drug addict and also seeking through some philosophy to become a god, small g. I did this with another guy I met leaning against a tree. And with learning this, I would never have even gone up to him, but I saw him lean against a tree, long black hair, tattoos, steel, and I went up to him, and I could see from his eyes he was stoned out of his brain. And so I had a short conversation with him, but it's a long story. I don't have time to go through, but I went to his place the next day. I figured he'd be a little bit more sober, and I found where he lived. Found out his story was he was a Satanist. He was an evangelical terrorist. He loved burning church buildings down. He was violent. He studied all the martial arts because he liked hurting people. He was a womanizer. He was an extreme alcoholic and a drug addict. And I got to sit down with him and take him through these 4 lessons. It's a bigger story, an amazing story. He accepted Christ. I've done this with the youth from high school to college kids. I've done it with dentists, doctors. I did this with a dentist I met one time. We were working on a mutual project, and I took him through these studies. And I don't know which one it was, but somewhere near the end of the 3rd one, we were sitting doing this in a restaurant, and he looked up to me again. He said, John, I've been waiting for you for 18 years to show up. He said, I dumped God and everything related to him 18 years ago, and I just dropped it. He hadn't been sitting around waiting for somebody to show up, literally, but he said, this is what I needed to hear 18 years ago. Baptize him in the ocean. Doctors, chiropractors, a rock singer, a young gal sat next to me at a dinner. She was the lead singer in a heavy metal rock group. Her and I had nothing in common.
18 years ago, and I just dropped it. He hadn't been sitting
other than
around
we're
waiting for
both
somebody to
humans.
show up, literally. But he said, this is what I
And
need
I
to
just did this conversation with them. That's all I do with anybody that I'm throwing together. I've done it with mayors of cities, just university graduates, scientists, PhD scientists. That's back up the top. My computer repairman, a woman in Peru that lives in an adobe house. She went through these lessons. She studied Christ. She accepted Christ. She learned how to use these lessons in Spanish. And in the coming year and a half, she did these studies and baptized 30 women in a creek. A man dying of cancer. An incredible story. My dearest friend in Chile now. I talk to him every week. I've been supporting him basically for 15 years. When I met him, I was visiting a prison. He was known as the Angel of Death. He ran the prison inside, killed a lot of people in his lifetime. I got to take him and a group of prisoners, about this many, through the lessons. I asked for decisions at the end. After several weeks, he accepted Christ. And we took in a children's swimming pool into the courtyard of the prison, and we baptized him and 7 other guys with guards with Uzi machine guns standing around. A lawyer who had muscular dystrophy took him through these lessons. I got down to the last one and asked him, "Do you believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God?" He said, "John, if you had asked me that question 3 weeks ago, I'd have laughed in your face." He said, "I can't say I'm really to do something right now, but man, I'm thinking." Ended up baptizing him in a swimming pool. Neighbors just got word 2 days ago that a couple of neighbors, I'd never met him before, that we did this forum with them. It took him through the studies, accepted Christ. He died about 2 years ago, all kinds of diseases. She just died 2 years ago. We just heard that before I left. But they died in Christ. And then my dad, skeptic till he was 79. And I did these studies with him when he was about 65. An interesting story. And he didn't believe in Jesus then, but the seed had been planted. And at 78, he got colon cancer and was dying, and he knew it. And it woke him up. So, just skim through the pictures there. And so, okay, right here. If I can do this, why did I share this with you? If I can do this, the turtle, and I think most of us are turtles, you can do it. There's only one being who doesn't want you to do this. You can do it. Let's go ahead. Show the rest of the pictures. Just skim through them, a couple seconds on each one. These are some of those people. So the question is, I challenge you, get trained. Your turn will come here. You'll be able to get in this. Men, women, I don't care. I don't care what your race is, your poverty level or wealth status. Whether you're well known or, I don't care. It doesn't matter. God can use you to help others find Jesus in a calm, respectful way. You don't have to memorize this. It's written for you. It's printed. If they're not interested, you don't have to do it. Isn't that wonderful? And they like that. They appreciate that. If I can do it, you can do it. We're training thousands around the world, and we need to get it caught going here in the U.S. So you've got people here, Mike, Chris, and others who are going to be helping you get this training. And so when we all get to heaven, I guess the question is going to be, what are your stories going to be? And it's not earning your way to heaven. It's not a glory kind of thing. It's just, God, I was able to do this. I'm going to close with this. I think I was sharing this with the group last night. My best friend was leading a Bible study in Oregon, 10 people. And when he got done, he was teaching them our lessons, these 4 lessons. And he got done, there was an elderly lady sitting off the side. And everybody else went to dessert or something, and he went to talk to her. He said, "Well, Susan, what's the matter?" She said, I'm a talker. Everybody knows me. I'm always talking about my wonderful husband, how he does everything for me. He's the most wonderful husband you could ever want. And then I have this old antique car that was restored, 57 Chevy or 55, I don't know what it was, but she said, I drive it all over town here and everybody sees it and I love talking about it. And I'm a graduate of the University of Oregon and I'm an alumni and I support the school and I'm always talking about school. But she said, I fear when I get to heaven, no one is going to come up to me and say, thank you for helping me find Jesus. And she's fixing that. That does not have to be our story. It should not be our story. So I challenge you and I encourage you when this training becomes available and they can take another group, get in there, and be patient. God will use you, young or old, man or woman. God bless you.